Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in Greenville, South Carolina, and you can find all of my contact information in the show notes. If you need a realtor in the Greenville area or elsewhere, remember, I don't just work in Greenville County. We've got a lot of local counties around here: Oconee, Pickens, Spartanburg, Anderson, Greenwood. I work in all of those counties, and so if you need help in any of those, please let me know. You can find all of my contact information in the show notes. If you need a realtor for outside of the area as well, I can help you with that too. If you don't need a realtor, maybe you are a realtor, please just hit the like button. And if you do need a realtor, hit the like button as well. Please subscribe to the show. Make sure you don't miss future episodes. If you can leave a rating or a review, if you're using, for instance, Apple Podcast or Spotify, you should be able to do that. So I would greatly appreciate if you guys could do that. Today, we are going to be doing a 10-point guide to buying a home in Greenville, South Carolina, in the greater Greenville area in 2026. And I don't know in the 6 years that I've been doing this, but yeah, basically exactly 6 years I've been doing this podcast. I don't know that I've ever done a home buying guide specifically for the year that we're in. I've done various different similar things, but I was thinking about it and I was like, this is actually kind of useful information. A lot of people just want to know what is it like buying or selling a home in Greenville in 2026, and I have the inside scoop because I do this for a living. And so I have a 10-point guide here that I want to go through, and I might make this an annual feature on the show. And I'm hoping to do a home selling guide as well, maybe next week. We'll see. I cover, different current events that happen. And so sometimes something will pop up that's like, okay, we need to do the episode on that specific event, or weird things happen with mortgage rates, which, by the way, are currently, per Mortgage News Daily, at 5.99. So we went back down into the fives again. It's going to take a lot more it's going to take like the economy to really weaken for that to get pushed down much further than that, in my opinion. But that's great news, right? We really, in the ideal scenario, we wouldn't have them go much higher than the low sixes. And so to have them sitting at 5.99, that is really helpful if you're a buyer right now. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. And we're going to talk a little bit about rates in this show. So let's just get right into my 10-point guide to buying a home in the greater Greenville market in 2026. My first point that I want you guys to understand is that we are in a soft seller's market, okay? A soft seller's market. What does that mean? Well, let me start by saying this. I have been repeating for a couple of years now that we are in a nobody market, right? Not a buyer's market, not a seller's market, a nobody market. And there's a reason for that. It's because everyone's upset, right? Usually if it's a buyer's market, buyers are happy to a certain extent, right? Oftentimes buyer's markets happen when the economy kind of is in the tank. So that's not always a good thing. But generally speaking, buyers, they have, in a buyer's market, have tons of options. They have tons of leverage. They're happier. In a seller's market, sellers are happy. They can get whatever they want. They can sell a home sight unseen very quickly. All of that. Over list price, bidding wars, all of those things. Sellers love, for the most part, all of those things. Well, because we haven't had either of those dynamics going on, it's been awful for buyers. Buyers haven't had any options that they've liked. It's taken a long time, and sellers haven't been seeing the kind of appreciation that they wanted. All of these different things have resulted in it just feeling like a nobody market. Everyone's upset. Everybody feels like they're either not getting enough for the home that they're trying to sell, or they're overpaying for the home they're trying to buy. And I feel like that is shifting ever so slightly in the direction of sellers. But I'm calling it a soft seller's market because we're still not seeing anything insane, right? We're not seeing a ton of crazy things happening, and I don't want to get ahead of myself a little bit because I'm going to cover this later, but we're not seeing, tons of different bidding wars. We're not seeing, insane appreciation. We're not seeing, people buying homes sight unseen for the most part. But it is not a buyer's market. Buyers don't have as much leverage, and it's definitely picked up. And that's gonna be my next point as well. It's definitely picked up, and that picking up benefits sellers, right? In terms of activity level. In fact, when I was, if you guys didn't listen to last week's episode, I had a little vacation, a little 40th birthday hiking trip I did. And I immediately knew as soon as I left, I was like, okay, the market's picking up. Because my phone started, you could just sense it, right? There's just this little sense, kind of like when you're watching a sporting event, you can feel the momentum shift. And, how do you track that? What even is momentum? But there is definitely steam that you can sense in kind of the same way. What is it? How do you track it? Some of that we can track. That's why I go over the market stats every month. And because I don't want just what I feel to be my read on the market, right? Because that could be wrong. I might have a good year when everyone else is having a bad year. And the stats will parse that out for us. But I'm hearing this from other people as well. There has been a pickup in the month of February, and that's what we're experiencing right now. And that's resulting in it kind of turning the needle a little bit from a nobody market, a little bit more towards it being a soft seller's market. People always ask me that. Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? What kind of a market is it? So there you go. Soft seller's market. Number two here, as I've already alluded to, the market really has picked up tremendously in recent weeks, but we could have a similar dynamic. I don't want to assume that this is going to be the entire year of 2026, right? The hot season in real estate is really February, like usually the middle of February through like Memorial Day. Is kind of like the traditional, like really, really hot season. And then obviously the prime season continues on until Labor Day. And then that's really when we start to see it really start to tail off for the remainder of the year. So that's kind of normal seasonality, right? We have that happen a lot. Last year we had something interesting where the spring season was really busy, really hot. And I thought, oh man, this is going to be a crazy year. And then it just died in the summer, like around July the 4th, Independence Day. And July can be a weird month, right? We see if I pulled up the market stats right now and showed you every July, you would see that July does some wonky things. There's a lot of people taking those end of summer vacations, and all of that. But that was a very unusual, just a huge steep decline in activity in general that happened in the summer last year. So that could happen again. I'm not going to say that just because the market has picked up a lot right now that that's going to continue on for the rest of 2026. However, I will say this. It's more likely to happen this year than last year because of where mortgage rates are right now, right? They're hovering, like I said, at 5.99% per Mortgage News Daily. Let me just look at, you guys won't be able to see this if you're watching on YouTube, but I am just going to pull this up on my end and see what they were around this time last year. Around this time last year, on February 20, so I'm recording this on February 24th, 26. February 24th, 25 per Mortgage News Daily, they were at 6.87. So they were 88 basis points higher last year than they are right now. That's meaningful. That is very, very meaningful. And that could be the difference between whether people are active this year or not, and whether the activity level that we're currently having in what appears like is going to be a busy spring season, if that continues for the rest of the year. By the way, if I do continue doing these 10-point guides as an annual thing, I think that this will be around the time that I do them, because this is when I can start to get a read for what's the market doing, right? If we don't have a big pickup in mid-February, or at least by late February, that's a problem. That means that the market is going to be really slow. That's almost a guarantee that the entire year is going to be slow. The fact that it's busy right now is not a guarantee that it's going to be busy for the rest of the year. But if you guys continue to watch the show or listen to the show, you will be on the front lines. You will know what is happening. Number three, everyone wants to do wholesale contingencies, right? This is a thing that we're running into. A lot of buyers, they don't have enough money, or they don't feel comfortable buying their next home without it being tied to the sale of the home that they currently own. So it just feels like everyone wants to do home sale contingencies, except for one party, and that's sellers, right? Sellers don't want to be doing home sale contingencies, and that's not unusual, right? It's pretty normal, but that tells you alone, at least for me, that this is more of a soft seller's market rather than it being a soft buyer's market, because if it were a soft buyer's market, sellers would have basically no choice. They would have to be accepting home sale contingencies. And I'm not saying it's impossible to get them to accept them. I've had multiple clients that have successfully negotiated a home sale contingency. But you have to understand that sellers have to be sold on the contingency and that the contingency is going to be safe, because that's a huge risk to take on if you're a seller, right? Now you have one more thing that can go wrong. You have no control over that listing that your potential buyer is selling. You have no control over that. If they overprice it, you can't tell them that they need to lower the price. Literally, the only leverage you have is baked into whatever contract and addenda that you have. And there are ways as a seller to protect yourself within the contractual language and addenda. But a lot of sellers they just don't want to mess with any of that, right? Understandably, as a realtor, I don't want to mess with any of that. There's just a whole lot that can go wrong. So as a buyer, you need to understand, if you want to make a competitive offer on a home, the best way to do that is with no home sale contingency. And then if you really must do a home sale contingency, and there are ways to avoid that, by the way. There are sometimes bridge loans and things like that that you can do in order to avoid a home sale contingency. I'm not going to get into all of that in this podcast. That could be like a whole show in and of itself. But there are degrees of contingencies, right? If you're making a home sale, if you're making an offer contingent on a home sale that hasn't even been listed yet, right? The home has not been listed yet. That's a very different home sale contingency than you're making an offer and you've got your home listed and it's already under contract. And then, you can go even further. We've got the appraisal in, we're through due diligence, we're through all these different things. Like, the more you've gotten through, the further down the road you've gotten, the closer you've gotten to the closing of the home that you're selling, the stronger your home sale contingency is. In fact, I think a good agent would consider, if I have a home sale contingency on a home that's already under contract and we're kind of through all the contingencies on that home, appraisal, due diligence, all of that, a good agent will see that and be like, that's still a home sale contingency, right? That's still a big wild card, but it's a pretty safe one. And that's one I think that most agents would be comfortable with. And for the most part, I would as well. I would explain to my clients pros and cons. But that's a lot different than, okay, we don't even have this home on the market. And that's what I'm running into a lot personally, is people wanting to try to make offers on homes contingent on the sale of their home. They don't even have their home on the market yet. And we've got to have a heart-to-heart conversation about how to approach that, because that is it's a hard sell. It is a hard sell. There's only so much magic that I could do as a realtor in those situations, because there's another knowledgeable realtor, theoretically, on the other side that is assessing all of this and saying, I can't even assess your home sale contingency. I don't know anything about that home. I don't know what it looks like. I haven't seen pictures of it. What are you going to list it for? How many buyers are out there looking for a home like that? Like, there's so many questions. And so you just have to keep that in mind as a buyer. Number 4, if you're in this market, right? If you're from Greenville, you're going to be like, well, yeah, that's obvious. But if you're outside of Greenville, you might not realize this. But the Greenville market is extremely sensitive to mortgage rates. And this is kind of what I alluded to before, where, the fact that rates were a year ago 6.87 and now they're 5.99, like, that could be the difference between us having a really good year in terms of general home sales and a really, really bad year. And that is just because Greenville is an affordable market, right? People move to Greenville from outside of Greenville, and they stay in Greenville because it is an affordable market. Affordable in terms of housing, affordable in terms of taxes, affordable from the standpoint that we have a strong economy. All of that. Listen, if Greenville was an unaffordable market, if Greenville, had home prices like San Francisco, nobody would be moving here. Nobody would be moving here. The affordability is a key piece of the draw for people when they move to Greenville. And if you don't realize that, you need to start to realize that. You need to start to understand that. That's why I talk about affordability so much in this show. And so the mortgage rates really hurt our market. Now, we haven't seen depreciation for the most part. Obviously, some specific neighborhoods have, but market-wide, we've not seen depreciation in our market, even when rates went up to 8% at one point. But did it slow things down? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it slowed things down quite a bit. Near recession level activity in some instances. I had my first listing I couldn't sell late 2024. It's been years since I've had a listing I couldn't sell. And, sometimes these sorts of things happen. And again, super duper sensitive to mortgage rates. And so if we see more downward pressure on rates, like if we start to see rates go down to, 5.5, I don't know at what point exactly, and I, talked a little bit about this on the show, where the different points would be. Definitely seems like around 5% is like a huge tipping point. But at what point would we really start to see the momentum start to build? Is it 5.75? Is it 5.5? Or is it just that 5% number? Do we need to come down an entire 99 basis points down to 5% in order to really see the market kind of take off again and go from a soft seller's market to just a pure seller's market? Maybe. We don't know. But I do know that the further rates go down, the more activity we are going to see. And so you need to be following that, okay? If you're interested in where the market's going, there's a really simple way to do that. Go to Mortgage News Daily and just look at what it says the aggregate rate is. If it says, basically anything below 6.25, then the market is going to be, basically in that soft seller's market. Unless it really starts to go into the mid to low fives, then I think you can start to expect it to be just a pure standard seller's market. Number 5 here, production built. Keywords, production built, not custom. Production built new construction is still cheaper than existing homes in aggregate. If you're new to the show, I've talked about this a lot. This has been one of the biggest trends in Greenville real estate, and that is it is cheaper to buy a new home than it is to buy a pre-existing home that has already been lived in. An insane development. We've never had that happen before in all of the history that we can look at least, that we have data on in Greenville. It's never happened until basically the past year. And that's not even factoring in all of the incentives that builders are offering, which are tremendous, right? A ton of incentives, flex cash, rate buy downs, all upgrades, all sorts of things. That's not even factored in. Like, even if they didn't have those things, the price, again, on average, would still be cheaper than the price on average for existing home sales. Insane. And it's continued. I just looked it up right before I started recording. I looked it up, and it has held. It has continued to hold for the past several months, and that's something you need to be aware of. Now, I've been critical of production built homes on this show because you go to one of these mega home builders, and it's a volume game for them, right? They don't, I don't want to say they don't care about their customers, whatever. I get in trouble for saying that. But they're very numbers oriented, right? And they should be. They've got shareholders to speak to. A lot of these are public companies. They need to be concerned about the bottom line. And if they're a public company, they need to be concerned about that really first and foremost. Now, providing great customer service, building a great home, whatnot, is the best way to do that, but it doesn't always play out that way. And that's where I have concerns. when it comes to my clients buying new construction. So I will oftentimes express those concerns to them, not to talk them out of it. I don't have any reason to talk them out of it. In fact, a lot of these builders are offering incredible incentives to realtors now as well, right? They love realtors again. We had that stretch from 2020 through to 2022 where they didn't like us. They love us again, right? Because they need to move their inventory. And they're willing to even pay us, above market average in some instances. Now, what's market average? I'm not going to get into that. I'm not allowed to. And there's really not a way to track it except anecdotally talking to other agents, not to try to price fix or anything, but just to hear what is going on. We find out, when we have a listing, we have a bunch of agents come through and ask, hey, are you offering this amount? Because this is what my buyer is under contract to pay me if the seller doesn't pay this amount. So we find out things about, commissions and compensation through various forms. And builders are oftentimes willing to pay more than that right now, the way the market currently is. And they should, because it costs or it takes actually more time. If you have a good realtor, it takes more time out of their schedule to help you with new constructions, more meetings. You have to go over paperwork you're not familiar with. And I do that when I get those builder contracts. Sometimes they're really long. I read every line. And I'm not an attorney. I always have to recommend to my clients that they have an attorney look over that as well. But I can pick up on some things that as a realtor I'm familiar with that are either not standard practice or, okay, here's something that I want to flag for you, things of that nature. So there's more that goes into it, and potentially more pay as well. It just kind of depends. Not every builder is that way. But long story short, there are some concerns that I have when it comes to new construction, when it's production built by one of these big, national home builders. You need to be aware of that. Not too many of my clients are coming to me with the initial thought that they want to build. For the most part, they're coming to me saying, I want to buy an existing home, something that's already built, something that's on the market that I can look at, that I can touch, that I can smell, that I can see. And then at some point in that process, they realize, it's cheaper to just buy a new home. Why wouldn't I do that? And again, it makes a ton of sense, except you've got to be aware of the pitfalls. A home that was built 30 years ago mostly was built better than a home that's built in 2026. That's just the reality of the situation. And it's not always the case 100 times out of 100, but is it like 95 out of 100? Yeah, probably something like that. And so that's something that you just need to be aware of. Number 6, property taxes have gone up. I got reassessed last year, but they are still relatively low to other areas of the country, unless you are buying an investment property or a second home. Very expensive property taxes for second homes and investment properties. Basically, the people that own those second homes and investment properties are taxed as if they are owning commercial property. And they essentially subsidize all of the owner occupants. The owner occupants don't pay nearly as much. And so they have gone up, but it's still, when I'm talking to people out in other markets, I'm hearing them telling me your property taxes are really cheap compared to what we're used to. And they're currently in the process of working to give people 65 and older additional reductions off their taxes. There already is one baked in, and they're about to get even more discounts on their taxes. You want to know why they do that? Because it's an election year. And you know who votes? Older people. Older people love to vote. You know who they love to vote for? People that give them tax breaks. Yes. Okay. You following here? All right. So that's what's happening. And by the way, if you're not familiar with how property taxes in this area work, we have reassessments every 5 years, unless a sale happens, and that triggers an automatic reassessment. Typically happens the year later. So if you buy a house in 26, you'll probably get reassessed in 27. Our taxes are paid in arrears. So the property taxes for 26 haven't been paid yet. And the reassessment, if even if you bought in early 26, in my experience, that reassessment typically doesn't happen until the next year. So you wouldn't actually see, for the most part, again, assuming they continue with the way they've been doing it, you wouldn't actually see your property taxes increase until the end of 2027 if you buy in 2026. What that looks like, let's say you buy a house for $500,000. Usually the reassessments come in a hair below that. They probably do that just so that people don't get angry at them. So, you buy for $500,000, it'll get reassessed at like $485, something like that, more often than not. So, in case you didn't know, now you do. That's how our local property taxes, for the most part, work. Homeowners insurance goes hand in hand with property taxes, right? The two escrow items, two items that are most typically paid for by the mortgage company, in addition to the mortgage itself. Homeowners insurance is a problem. Okay, I've talked about this before. It's continued to be a problem. We've had insurers leave the South Carolina market. We haven't had any like major storms since Hurricane Helene came through here, but and that was, a year and a half ago at this point. But we're still seeing insurers just really tighten things up. Not very sure what the solution is. But I will tell you this. If you're buying a home that has an old roof, you need to talk to your homeowner's insurance representative like immediately. Talk to your agent and see what their requirements are if they're going to have any issues with the roof, because that's what we're running into more often than not. Some insurance companies are even saying if the roof is over 10 years, we are not insuring it, which is insane, right? A lot of these roofs are built to last for 25 to 30 years. So to say if it's over 10, we're not going to insure it, that's just a crazy response, in my opinion. And I almost wish that the government would intervene and say they couldn't do that, but I know what would happen if the government did that. Those insurers would just completely pull out, and we would have even fewer insurance companies to go to. So that's not an appropriate solution. So unfortunately, this is where we're at. Homeowners insurance is a problem. You need to talk to an insurance agent pretty early in the process of buying a home to make sure that you're good to go when it comes to that. Number 8, everything is overpriced right now. And there is a good reason for this, right? Most sellers are not motivated. They don't need to be. They're not in a situation where they're forced to sell their home. A lot of them have really cushy mortgage rates, 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%. And so if they don't get top dollar for their home, what I keep hearing is, you know what, I'm just going to rent it out, or I'm not going to move. I'm just kind of stuck here. Golden handcuffs, as some people call it. Golden because of how low their mortgage rate is, and how cheaply they bought their home for. Although in some instances, I'm seeing people that bought a home, in a new construction neighborhood and then wanted to sell a year later, and the builder lowered the prices on them after they bought, and so just immediately diminished the value of their home. And now their home is worth either less than when they bought it, or barely worth what it was when they bought it. And then you factor in all those closing costs, and they'd have to come out of pocket. They can't do that, etc., etc., etc. Everything is overpriced. And that is just the reality of the situation. Sellers are holding out for their numbers for the most part. And it's a shame if you're a buyer that you're having to deal with this. This is one of the big trends that resulted in, me calling it a nobody market before. And it's still, now a soft seller's market. But sellers still can't. They shouldn't overprice their homes, but they are. That's just the reality of the situation. They're trying to squeeze every dime and nickel out of every transaction. And a lot of this is just because they expected a certain rate of appreciation. They got used to a certain rate of appreciation for like 3 years. And then that rate of appreciation stopped. And it just caught people by surprise. When you have, I don't know exactly how many years it takes in real estate for like a trend to like solidify in people's minds. but we had crazy rates of appreciation for roughly 3 years. And I can tell you for a fact that solidified in people's minds. People got used to that. And it came as a big shock, a big system shock when that just the bottom fell out of that overnight. And so that's why everything is currently overpriced. Number 9, sellers are acting impulsively and irrationally. And one thing I keep seeing over and over again is that, you've heard the phrase, bird in hand is worth two in a bush. Sellers are focusing on the two in the bush, right? They're like, and they think they can get both of them in the bush, right? Get off that shotgun and get the bird shot in there and take your best shot and hope that somehow you get two birds, not with one stone, but with one round or one shell of bird shot. And that's frustrating, right? That's frustrating for me when I'm representing the buyer. That's frustrating when I'm representing the seller, because this is not the kind of market where, if you're not guaranteed, if you turn down an offer that's kind of close, you're not guaranteed, or kind of close to what you're looking for as a seller. You're not guaranteed at all to get a better offer. Honestly, your odds are that you're going to get a worse offer. But this isn't a seller show. This is a buyer show. And so the reason why I mentioned this here is that buyers need to be prepared. You can't expect a logical negotiation and I've run into this a bunch of times, for sellers to follow through on something that they haven't put in writing. I'm constantly talking to agents, listing agents that are saying, well, here's what my seller is saying. Here's what they think. Here's what they feel. And then it ends up, you start negotiating in writing, and everything that they said is different. Everything they want to put in writing is different than what they had told you. And that can be very, very frustrating. And you just have to be prepared that sellers are impulsive and irrational right now. They're just, again, they're trying to figure out what is the market like, and why is my home not worth as much as I thought it was going to be worth. And so this is what we keep having over and over and over again. And as a buyer, you need to be prepared for that. And part of the value of having a buyer's agent, I'm very pro buyer agent. Obviously, I operate as a buyer agent, but even on my listings, if I have someone come to an open house that's not represented by a buyer agent, I'm like, what are you doing? And maybe they're not like actively looking just yet. But seriously, get someone on your side. You need someone on your side. You in a new construction, possibly buying new construction, you think that you're gonna go toe to toe with the builder and get the builder to listen to you? No, you need to have an agent on your side the entire time, especially when you're working with a builder. That's a mega corporation. You're going to negotiate with a mega corporation? Okay, good luck. And so kind of getting ahead of myself here, or going off on a rabbit trail. But long story short, the way to protect yourself and to be able to get through all of this irrationality and impulsivity, or I don't even know if that's a word, but the way to help yourself is to have a good buyer's agent that knows how to handle that knows how to gently push back, explain, maybe not gently, maybe sometimes firmly, but help to explain to the listing agent, hey, this is irrational, and here's why my client's offer that they're pushing back on actually makes a ton of sense for them. And so that's something to keep in mind there. Number 10, I already alluded to this, but bidding wars aren't as common as they have been at other times. Obviously, they've not been very common the past few years at all, but they do still happen. In fact, they were happening between 2008 and 2012 when we had the worst housing crash of a generation, multiple generations. We were still having bidding wars in Greenville. Not on everything, only on a select few. Same thing as now. It's not happening very often, but when it happens, they're often extremely aggressive. You've got people really, really fighting over, it's a unique house. And there's something unique about it. It's more affordable. It's got this feature. It's got that feature. Whatever the case. When it happens, it's aggressive. And what I keep seeing over and over again is in these multiple offer situations, buyers think they can just get by with like a full price offer and decent terms. Like, yeah, we're giving them what they're asking for, right? No. In an intense, aggressive, multiple offer situation, you need to be intense and aggressive. And ask your agent what they recommend. If they don't recommend being intense and aggressive, you need to fire that agent, okay? Like, let's just be real here. You're not going to get that home. I had a multiple offer situation a few months ago on one of my listings, and that was great. And yeah, some of the offers were just like, why you wasted your time. Don't waste your time. Don't waste my time. You know, I'm required to present every offer to my sellers. I don't want to present them. Here are 2 really, really good ones, and then 5 that are just like all the same, just like at list price, and you know, they should have known to be more aggressive. It's just frustrating. And it again, it's just a waste of time for everyone. So understand, if you find yourself in a bidding war situation, now if it's just one other person, if you can figure out, okay, they just got one other offer, okay, that's different. But if you're in a bidding war and listing agent is saying they've got multiple offers coming through and there's a lot of showings happening at the house, you know it's going to be competitive, you know it's going to be aggressive. You need to come through with a competitive and aggressive offer. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. Obviously, it's something I can help with. I always do. Part of the advantages of working with a buyer agent that also helps seller clients, I see it from both sides. So I can take a holistic perspective as opposed to some that are just buyer specialists that never see it from the other side. So those are 10 points to help you buy a home in the greater Greenville area in 2026. I hope that was helpful for you guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening. My contact information is in the show notes. Please like, rate, review, subscribe to the show. We will talk to you guys again next time.